Okay. Essentially, guys, I'll do this as like an economics focus. So, in the first chapters, like up to this point, you guys have been doing uh, um, like if I would say there's a central thing that you tend to talk about, it's like interactions with the environment. Like, why is the Indian Ocean trade the way that it is? Somehow it relates to technology and interactions with the environment. At this point, it probably shifts more towards economics and economic systems. And like at a certain level, I just write it off the top here. Um, Economic systems, it's how does feudalism lead to mercantilism that leads to capitalism that leads to um, a fight or a strain with socialism and communism, which is another form of socialism. Anyhow, to where we're at today. Got it. And there's probably some more things that I could put in there, but being able to describe these economic systems is hugely helpful to the things that are going on there. So, excuse me, that was for Tori and Joy to listen to. Just me, cough up phlegm and look for my thing right here. There you go. Okay. And so today, let's talk about mercantilism for a moment. Okay. And I'm not even sure this is 100% the total thing. If they talk about this more in this chapter or mercantilism or the next chapter. By the way, you don't have this Monday off, but you have the next Monday off, which really kind of throws off like how to have a lecture and whatnot. So just because it's the one before the test. Wait, this one's the one before the test. So you guys, everything's due Monday. Anyhow, it's just weird. The whole system is weird. So mercantilism is king controlled or financed king controlled financed companies. Okay. And what's happening is they hand out usually what's called a charter. Okay. And you guys might be able to remember this from like your like studying of US history. Does that make sense? And the charter is basically for someone to own the entire, own a monopoly in of a colony. Okay. So when you guys are looking at this chapter is not about mercantilism outright. It's going to be about Spanish Latin America, or it's got Portuguese in there too. But what was it like to live under them? And I think so far, I actually do think the Columbian Exchange, which I don't need to go over some more, is actually focused on in this one, and the need for slaves comes in because most of the population dies off. Okay, so but mercantilism, you need to understand what's going on. Okay, I told you guys that Hernan Cortez became the richest man in the world. Well, or at least it seemed like that. And then the king and the queen, and I think by this time Ferdinand had died, or maybe Isabella had died, but only one of them was left, and they were ticked at Hernan Cortez because he's making bank. So what did they do? They declared it all the kings. Got it? So the king had total control of what was coming out of Spanish Latin America. And so when you're thinking about that, that's the mercantile system. And this is going to give the reason why pirating became such a big deal. Because what is the big business in Spanish Latin America? Does anyone know? Not gold, but silver. Okay? And so you'll be introduced to the Potosi mine in this is in Peru. Okay? And it's like the biggest silver vein. I think they're still getting silver out of it. And it is just massive. Well, what's the problem with silver mines? It's hard to dig all the silver out. So you need a source of labor. And what they did is they just used what they call the META system. Okay. The META system is basically spend a few, I think it's 6 weeks, 6 weeks a year working, or in shifts of 6 weeks, working in the mines. And the labor, whether it's whether it's slave labor over from Africa or if it's Amerindian labor, Amerindian labor, it's going to end up doing this system where they spend 6 weeks working in the mine, which is super hazardous and could kill you. So because you don't want someone living there all the time, and you think for an owner, they're losing the value of the slave if they die in the mine. And for the Amerindian, they're going to be frustrated with it. The Potosi mine is 100% like this kind of like weird rotating forced labor system. Everyone got it there? Which is relatively normal. Well, who's sending them over and who's kind of making the money off of this is the haciendas, okay? The hacienda are massive farm plantations. And when I mean massive, I mean I'll just go, I know Guatemala better. Even today, there are 6 families that own 80% of the land. Everyone got it there? And so that idea started way back in the Spanish, when the Spanish have control, and they basically go, Hernan Cortez, you own this corner of Mexico in terms of land, and then his family passes it down, passes it down, passes it down, passes it down. Everyone kind of got the picture there? And then, so these 3 words, I'm forgetting, okay, the META system and mercantilism are all things that you guys kind of need to know in terms of like talking about the economic system and how it works. Got it? And so these massive farm plantations are just make it so that a few wealthy people own all of the land. Everyone got it there? As opposed to the people in control. Now, remember, the Native Americans are all like, we just live here and work here and live off the land. They're not concerned about trade. They're not trying to get things overseas. They're trying to work together and just live there. And now they're being forced into kind of labor situations. Everyone got it there? And this also, again, because they tend to like rebel against that at times, they're going to end up being like, I'm out. I'm not going to work for you, Hernan Cortez. You're a jerk. And then they're going to end up like going up in the mountains sort of idea. Just when I went to Costa Rica, when I was your guys' age for a mission trip, we served a group of Native Americans that did not speak Spanish that had been living in the mountains of Costa Rica for centuries upon centuries of centuries and in the rainforest. And that's kind of what was the only like defense against that. The location that happened the worst at is Brazil, where essentially they didn't even try to use the Amerindians. They just started bringing over slaves. Everyone kind of got it there? Okay. Now, this all is called the encomienda system, which in my mind is just simply trying to say economy for the Spanish America. Obviously, just the Spanish word for economy. And the encomienda system is going to send the wealth back to Europe. Okay? Okay? You can kind of see it there. All of this is based off of a weird demographic system. Guys, what do I mean when I say demographics? That start to arise in Spanish America. What do I mean by demographics? Populations, okay, and how you break up or divide out, or my new favorite word that I have to use for my bureaucratic WASP thing that I have to do, disaggregate people. There you go, disaggregate them. So aggregate means sum of all, so I'm unsumming them all. Got it? Does that make, never, okay, moving on. Anyhow, I'm laughing at that word. Okay, so here's what happens, and it's going to feel, it shows the difference between, say, the North American colonies, where the British got, or and the Spanish colonies. Even the Portuguese colonies are significantly different on this, but are hardly emphasized. But the Spanish colonies on this are super important because it's going to change and create kind of a mishmash of different races and ethnicities and things that don't quite have good categorization. So if you go in here on the encomienda system, the most important person is the viceroy or the governor. That's all that means. And the viceroy is going to be from Europe. And he is going to be from a noble family. And he is going to be important. He is going to bring over, they call them peninsulars, because they're coming from the Iberian Peninsula. They're coming from Spain, that are native Europeans. Okay. And they're going to move over. And those people are going to be more important than the Creoles. Okay. And the Creoles are going to be, I'll just go European pure ethnicity. And I hate using that word, but that's how they would have seen it. Okay. Ethnicity. I did that wrong. And so have you guys all read your Harry Potter? Okay, this is like the pure blood, right, versus mud blood sort of like argument. Does that make sense? And so, yes. And so instead of Muggleborn, yes. Poor, what's her name? Hermione. Sorry, Hermione. Okay, you got to get picked on by Draco. So here's Draco. There you go. Did that make sense? Okay. Huh? Good what? Well, I'm just going like when you're looking at the social status, this is it's hard not to be racist with it and be like, look, white people up here, right? And we're going to keep moving down. No, Native Europeans. So make sure you got that right. Yeah, Native Europeans. Yeah, but you know, Neville's parents are, you know, they got crucioed to. Anyhow, I'm just saying that, dude. It's funny. So I read it once, and then I read it to my kids, and like when I'm reading out loud book one to my kids, anytime you mention Neville, I'm like, and it's like he's getting picked on, you know, he's like the idiot in the first book, and you're like, no, don't pick on Neville. It's not okay. His parents aren't okay. Don't do it. Don't pick on Neville. Okay. All right. From here, guys, this is where the categorization starts getting confusing. The mulattoes are actually the next way up. Now that's going to be African mixed with European descent. Okay, and then you're going to have below here the mestizos, and they're going to be Native American versus mixed with European descent. Okay. Now, what's going on here is this. The Spanish are fine intermarrying. Okay. The Portuguese really aren't. They will, but they won't. And just think like the British, like think of our own like American history. They absolutely would not intermix. Got it? They very rarely would. Actually, it's kind of funny because they would, if someone did, they tended to become more Native American descent. Like they'd get more identified. The European born would get more identified Native American descent. And so what's happening here, notice here, this is kind of important, but often the mulattoes would get used into the artisan things. Think they would become blacksmiths. Got it? Where these guys would be left to the side and be told to just become normal laborers or whatever else it may be. And so that became a big deal. And really, the African slaves are in society considered here for the Spanish America, and then all the Native Americans actually make up the bottom. And this is really looking at it through a ugly economic lens, because basically what we're saying is these guys don't help us work, these guys do. Got it? That's kind of what it's saying for the folks that are going on there. But it's going to create some natural tensions. Okay, that when we hit the 1800s, this is all going to explode because these guys don't like these guys. Got it? It's like, why in the world think your family's been living in America for 150 years? Why in the world is a peninsular, someone from Spain, actually getting to decide what the Creoles do? You get the idea? And that's going to lead to rebellion, or it's going to lead to revolution. And they're basically going to get rid of those guys. But to do that, they need these guys and these guys basically to also to side with them. These guys aren't really a factor, and these guys have to be given their freedom in order to do that. So Latin America will get its freedom more so than the things that are going on there. So this becomes like a big piece of like how Spain rules, and it'll have this sort of structure, but they have no problem intermarrying. Now, quickly, this is for the next chapter. I'm going to show you the plantocracy system that looks like this. Plantocracy, and this is basically, what is it, Caribbean. And the Caribbean will get, because of the slave trade and the mass amount of slaves that went in there, it'll get its own chapter. You basically have Europeans, and they will be in control. It is a plantation, and that is it. They have no intermixing or social structure. Then you're going to have here the mulattoes, okay? Those born with some white background in them, and it's mostly going to be due to, what do you call it, affairs, rape, whatever it may be. It's not like they were born because of that. And then the rest of it is just pure African slaves. Got it? And like that's going to create a crazier tension in places like Haiti. And so when you're looking at this, I think about it, okay, just think, I've been to the Dominican Republic. The Dominican Republic, right, it's an island that looks something like this. It has a line in it. This is Haiti. Haiti was French controlled by and large. It actually had a time where it was Spanish controlled, but and over here is the DR, which was always Spanish controlled. Columbus landed here. And they look very much like this, very intermixed. Like if you think famous baseball players, guys like David Ortiz or anyhow, they have some African blood, some native blood, some European blood. It's like it's all like mixed together. Here, someone from Haiti looks African of descent. Got it? And you'll see that this is going to lead to a revolution in this place that overthrows all of the Europeans completely out. And it'll become about the time that Thomas Jefferson is president of the United States, that it'll become an African republic, much like the United States will be, or African descent, and it becomes hugely controversial in the world. But I'm just showing you those two things because this is kind of the social status of this all. And again, guys, you're talking about things that are engaging, like things like racism, and then just seeing how that was kind of set up. And okay, the other thing that is going on in this era is the spread of Catholicism. Okay, so when you guys hit this era, you guys can, since we're about the time, it's funny to me because like I always get about this time of the year and it's all of a sudden it's like I'm talking about Halloween, but I don't want to talk about Halloween right now. I want to talk about the Day of the Dead. Guys, what is the Day of the Dead? Why is it the Day of the Dead? Huh? Remember ancestors. Okay. Okay, so you guys have all seen Coco, right? Come on. Okay, come on. You've all seen Coco. Yes? No? Or are we not allowed to watch it, just like you weren't allowed to watch Princess and the Frog? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So here's what you guys want to do here is to think Catholicism spread. The reason it spread is because of a certain class of priests, a certain, what do you call it, monastery of priests, a group of monks or whatever you want to call it, called the Jesuits. Okay. Now, Jesuits are known for setting up schools. Okay. Like I think Father Sarah in California is a Franciscan monk, but by and large, the people that come to the New World are Jesuits. And think in reaction to the Reformation, they're going to say, let's go convert to Catholicism other parts of the world. And the most famous one I've already mentioned before is Ricci, but he goes to Catholicism conversion. And they see an opportunity because they're the first ones to the New World to convert the Native Americans. And so their job is to convert Native Americans. Now, it is fascinating to me, if you read accounts of this, how varied they are, and how they did it, because they're not exactly doing it. The monks are not doing it through forced labor, but they might literally like beat themselves, like the Jesuits might whip themselves so that they understand that the cross of Jesus Christ was taken for their sins. Does that make sense? Because it doesn't to me. That doesn't seem like it would want me to convert to their religion. But again, this is a society that's used to human sacrifice. So like they're like, okay, this might be another form of bloodletting, like to the corn god. And so just when you're talking about the corn, like you're talking about that, these guys are using kind of these masochistic, I'll just say, demonstrations of suffering to demonstrate Jesus Christ's death. And it seems very, very kind of manipulative. But I wanted to go to the Day of the Dead just to show you guys that this often comes up in what you should look for. And I don't know necessarily all the syncretisms, but I just know that like Aztec religion and the Day of the Dead is just a syncretism with what should be All Saints Day. Okay, so okay, just because Halloween seems to be coming up a lot, because remember the Reformation is on October 31st. That's the day it started, because that's when Luther put the 95 Theses on the wall. All Saints Day. Okay. The basic idea is this: the Catholics pray to the saints, and have famously, I think, for even the Protestants would know that they pray to Mary, but it's like there are more than just Mary that are considered saints, and they pray to them for certain abilities or whatever it may be. Not abilities, like certain like prayers or whatever it may be. So I think, St. Patrick, you're going to pray to him because you want the Irish to be successful or something. Anyhow, that's probably a bad description of that. But all the Day of the Dead is there's some form of ancestor worship in the Aztec religion. And they see, oh, this is the day when they pray to their dead people. So we're going to combine it with our day to pray to our dead people. And all of a sudden you've got kind of a new religious practice, the Day of the Dead. Ever got it there? And so when you're dealing with that, you start going like I'll say it this way: if like your Bible or your theology is, you're like, is this actually going to work in terms of like, okay, can you convert someone to Christianity, but they can celebrate the Day of the Dead? Do you see the problem there? But let me ask you guys this: why is Christmas on December 25th? It was because it's a pagan holiday. So the winter solstice is December 21st. The sun starts to peak out again, right? So all the pagans used to stop and like, woo, let's worship the sun god. We got it? And so the Christians came along and they're like, hey, instead of that, let's celebrate Jesus' birth. And we got it there? And then that kind of can also explain why Easter has a bunny producing a bunch of eggs. Do you get the idea? Because they were celebrating springtime, right? And then it became, that would be like fertility and all that sort of stuff would be celebrate. Every single group has some reason for why we decorate trees, because the Mennonites used to be like, that's where we had our secret meetings, and we would go hide in the trees and we'd light up a certain tree with candles, which seemed like it would just start a forest fire to me, but whatever. And then sort of idea. And then the Swedish are like the ones that like, they have girls dancing with candles on their heads, and we're like, no, it was in Sweden, and we used to decorate trees all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and say it this way: there's some conflicting like mythologies surrounding the Christmas tree. Just in case you're wondering, my dad, there's a verse in Jeremiah that basically says, don't decorate a tree and worship it. So I didn't have Christmas trees growing up because of that. Anyhow, it was sad. We don't get, anyhow, do not worship your tree, your Christmas tree, guys. It is not appropriate. Anyhow, my point is simply this. Okay, going back to All Saints Day for a moment, is you guys need to think when you see these religions, right, start to pop up, that you're dealing with some sort of syncretism. Got it? There's a syncretism between the Day of the Dead, that's whatever the Aztec part of this got added to All Saints Day when all the Catholics stopped and prayed to their ancestors, or prayed to the saints. They went to pray to their ancestors, and then you combined it together. Everyone got it there? And then it shot out the Day of the Dead, and then you could start debating now back and forth whether we should celebrate that. But the moment you start to say you shouldn't celebrate the Day of the Dead, Christmas is under is under argument at this point, in my opinion, because you got to go. All that was a syncretism of worshiping the sun at the winter solstice, and instead of worshiping Jesus's birth. Everyone kind of see it there. And why did they do that? Well, they did that because they were trying to convert a bunch of German, pagans to Christianity. And did that mean it needed to wreck all their holidays? Does that make sense? It was funny because the Yuletide, you guys know the Yule, like the fire log, completely like a pagan tradition, completely like let's burn the fire log for the sake of, worshiping whatever random god or whatever sort of idea. But at the same time, like, we like logs and fires. Anyhow, there you go. Okay, what else do we need to talk about here? I feel like I'm being kind of random in this focus here, but realize this is all dealing with economics. Okay, going back to economics. Okay, just guys, let me give kind of a big picture here in terms of like things that are going across. So starting with Cortez, right? You're going to have, I'm just trying to get you guys to think in terms of products. This is very helpful and worth like an essay itself. When you initially start to go out there, what does he bring back to sell? You guys know? Like, how does he make money? It's basically crops and whatever crops that they had. So they're introducing new crops into Europe. And then it's also going to be silver. Okay. And so then from crops, it's going to go to silver and gold. From silver and gold, it's going to go to tobacco. And I'll put indigo here as well. They figured out you could grow indigo. Neither of these are both luxury items. And so silver, it doesn't like it just stops. So the final one here, and this is what's going to lead to the Atlantic trade system, is that they realize we now have a location where we can grow sugar. And this is the one that's going to set up the Atlantic trade system. So realize things are changing over time. This is in terms of like what is being grown there. Okay, so think about that change that is mass producing here, but then it's there. Now notice silver. One of the things that's going to result from the silver is worldwide inflation. And it's going to tank unintentionally in a Mansa Musa sort of way the rest of the world's economies over time. It's not going to happen in like a year. It's going to take like 100 years, but by the 1700s, the Ottoman Empire, China, Russia are all struggling because they can't keep up with the inflation of the world because Europe has all the silver. Remember, one of my points is, how did Europe end up, I'll just go the country with all the colonies, right, in the 1800s? Part of the reason is because they're going to undermine, they never defeat the Ottoman Empire in a war, right, or not, I'll say not until the 1800s. They're only going to be able to control the Ottoman Empire because they keep costing more and they keep ending up with items that the Ottoman Empire wants. You'll get introduced to the Cavaliers and the turtle races, and the Ottomans are a trip, man. They're going to end up destroying the rest of the world because of inflation. Guys, what is inflation? Just making sure you understand your words. Right. So just guys, if America printed out a bunch more money right now, which essentially they did during the COVID, right? Then everything is going to go up in terms of prices, which you guys are experiencing. Got it? Or at least I'm experiencing. Maybe your parents are experiencing it. That said, think about this right now, though. The Europeans have all the source, especially the Spanish, have all the source of the silver in the 1500s, and then that's going to lead to a high increase in prices worldwide, because eventually all that silver is just going to get slowly spread over the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean trade, sort of idea. This is also what leads to, as mentioned before, the pirates. Okay, because let's face it here, the British and the French, particularly at this point, who are ticked about the Treaty of Tordesillas, and are like, why did the Portuguese and the Spanish get all the colonies? Are like sitting there going like, well, what can we do? And so people like, what's her name? Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen. she will send out, say, Sir Francis Drake or Sir Walter Raleigh. What are they supposed to do? They're supposed to attack Spanish ships and steal their silver. And that is how Queen Elizabeth funds the majority of her empire, which isn't a very big empire, by the way. She's really not doing that amazing. Got it there? And so piracy becomes almost the form of navy that's going on. And then what happens is you end up with wars. There'll be wars between Spain and England, or there'll be wars between France and England. And then it's like free reign, like you're a merchant ship and you see a French merchant ship, but you're British, and you can just pull out your cannons and attack them and take their stuff. Got it? It's like there's no control over that. By the way, this is all set up around a system called impressment, where you can grab anybody out of their bed or any out of bar. Just think if you were some loser at a bar by the seacoast, they needed some more guys on hand on a ship. They just go, we need you on the ship. And so they'd impress you into it, which means they got you really drunk and then drug you on the ship. And now you're part of the crew. Not necessarily getting paid real well either. Got it? And it really stinks and you might die of scurvy, but that's beside the point. Lockjaw, anyone? Does that make sense? And so just think about that system is not one of, like I'll say, high valued human life. You guys have all these choices. Where should I go to college? Well, if in the 1600s, if you're just hanging out by a bar, in near the coast, you were often impressed into slavery. The writer of Amazing Grace, John Newton, was trying to visit his girlfriend, and that he wanted to marry. It wasn't exactly his girlfriend, and she happened to live near the coast. So he goes and visits her, and then he's like riding back away to get from her and gets impressed onto a boat. Well, like at that point, do you want to be part of the British Navy, or do you want to be part of a pirate where you can make money? Like, do you get the idea? Or do you want to be part of that whole system? So this whole system is like really like throwing people off. Okay. Final thing I think I need to talk about just in terms of this lecture is, obviously, if you're the Native Americans, you're like, this isn't all that great. Got it? You're sitting there going for it. So you had a few things going on. You had relatively regular rebellions. The most famous one I'll just mention here, and it's easy to remember, is the Incan leader is okay. The Incan leader, and if you know rap, you'll remember it. His name is Tupac. Tupac's name is Shakur. So this is Amor. I think it's like this, the second. Okay. So basically, Tupac leads a rebellion against the Spanish and tries to reset up the Incan Empire. And because the Spanish have the guns and they're mostly have been destroyed, that's not going to go on there. So one response to the Spanish oppression is rebellion. More common is to kind of keep your practices hidden while, pretending to be Catholic. Got it? That's probably more common, which is kind of how you end up with the Day of the Dead sort of syncretisms. And then finally here, I wanted to say a moment about Bartholomew. It's Bartholomew, but in Spanish. Bartholomew de Casas. Wait. Am I right? Just go de Casas. Now I'm not remembering. Now I think I'd confused him with Diaz. De Casas, the houses. Okay. He is a Spanish monk who begins to write about human rights for the Native Americans. And he begins to describe the inappropriate practices of both other Catholic monks, practices of monks and of the conquistadors. Okay? And so when you guys are thinking about this chapter, this is one of my defenses to Christianity to you. And when looking at, to me, this is the ugliest Christianity gets. You could argue the Atlantic trade slave if I just mix them together, where they're just treating people, Christians are just treating people inhumanely. Got it? One of my arguments is, and I compare this guy to think Martin Luther King Jr., who's looking at his own human rights issues and calling it out. De Casas is a Catholic monk. He's a Jesuit, I think. And he basically goes, look, we are treating these people completely inappropriately. We're converting them in inappropriate ways. We're using forced labor. We're engaging in things where we're not actually taking care of the people that are going on. And so while Cortez considers himself a Christian, or Columbus considers himself a Christian, and you're like sitting there going like, well, if that's the type of Christian that you want to follow, well, you know what I mean? That's not the best type of Christian. Then maybe there's something wrong with Christianity. Christianity always has some form of correction that will say, look, we need to look out for the least of these. I'll just put it in Jesus' terms here. Those that are enslaved, those that are hurting or dying. And Casas is the one that kind of represents that in the Spanish area. Does that make sense? In the Spanish controlled Latin America. And so he starts to appeal to the king and the nobles to make sure that the Spanish start to treat their subjects, or sorry, the Spanish or the Creoles or whoever, start to treat their laborers or their subjects correctly. Everyone kind of got the picture there? And so anyhow, you guys will see some quotes from him. I might have you guys cap some on in the future, just so you guys can see it. But at least give Christianity, in terms of like when you're looking at, say, I don't know, the negative parts like the Crusades or the Conquistadors or the Atlantic trade system, that it does have a massive correction. In the Atlantic trade slave era, which I'll talk about this next week, I'll talk about John Newton, who was originally a slave trader, converted to Christianity because he almost died in the ocean. Like because he kind of had one of those like near-death experience, and then I'm going to commit myself to God. He was not a Christian before, but then would spend a good chunk of his life fighting the slave trade. He recognized it fully and completely as inappropriate and a sin and all those sorts of things. And believe me, I don't think I don't know, it's debatable. I think I would pick the African scramble as worse than the Atlantic trade slave, all however many people are going to die in the Atlantic trade slave aside. So just understand that's going on. There you go. That is the lecture.